Programme Open Space is given over to Anti-Fascist Action. The programme uses disturbing archive and news footage to highlight their violent and emotive struggle against supporters of the extreme right.
First, they came for the Jews. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the communists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for me. There was no one left to speak for me. Pastor Niemöller, victim of Hitler's Nazis. And then they came for me. Then they came for me. Then they came for me.
They came for me because I'm Menzi, singer in the Angelic Upstarts. Fascists attacked me here. They intended this to be my final gig. They wanted me to stop playing because I've always been an anti-fascist. At the same time, they were attacking a variety of bands with working class followers, including big names like the Pogues and Desmond Dekker. This was part of a wider plan by the extreme right to influence the music scene by terror. Luckily, there was someone to speak out for me. Anti-Fascist Action sorted it out, and I'm still playing. AFA, as we're known, is not a protest group. We're not in the business of complaining about Nazis, we're in the business of stopping them. Inevitably, this means confronting them on the streets. AFA was set up in 1985 to revive the militant anti-fascist tradition. Our original aims were drawn up on the back of a beer mat, and they stated that the purpose of the new organisation was to confront the fascists, both physically and ideologically. For the media, the rise of the far right in Europe is something that happened overnight. Monsieur Le Pen, the leader of the French National Front, by being allowed to use the issue of racism, is now setting the political agenda. Surrounded by women in Chanel suits, his image is as artificial as his glass eye. The original street fighters have now been joined by the middle classes. The first stage has been lost in France.
They haven't seen anything about race yet till we get going.
That's quite enough of that. This is the British National Party, who are currently the main party of the extreme right here. We've stopped them talking in this film for the same reasons as we're trying to stop them on the streets. We've learned from our experience that the greater freedom they are allowed, the greater their influence and the worse their subsequent behaviour. Their policy of repatriation tomorrow encourages violent racial hatred today. In Britain, there are 70,000 racist attacks a year, of which Tower Hamlets in East London has the highest ratio. It is no coincidence that this is the area of London that the BNP concentrate their energy. In the general election, they received 2,500 votes in this borough, using the battle cry, "Rights for Whites." Obviously, this was a conscious vote for their agricultural policy. Clearly, for a growing minority of the white working class who have been betrayed by all the mainstream parties, especially on issues like jobs and housing, the BNP are seen as the only radical alternative. Many governments today dishonestly put the blame for unemployment on immigration. In Germany in the 1930s, the unemployed correctly put the blame on the politicians. Then Hitler began to put the blame on the Jews. Many of those same politicians found it convenient to support him.
Only one thing could have stopped our movement: if our enemies had understood its principle, and from the first day had smashed with utmost brutality the nucleus of our new movement, Adolf Hitler.
In Britain, Hitler's disciple was Sir Oswald Mosley, founder of the British Union of Fascists, otherwise known as the Black Shirts. He used provocative marches through the Jewish areas to control the streets, to impress his establishment backers. The most famous ended in the Battle of Cable Street.
My friend and I, we were both 12, and we decided we'd like to be part of the human wall. And we went along on that day, and thousands and thousands of people. At first, the police, they were mounted police. All they tried to do was allow the traffic through. But there were too many people, and they were pushing the people who were in the road onto the curb. There were people being pushed through the plate glass windows of Gardeners, which was the big store on that corner. The police horses were up onto the pavement, and women were falling to the feet of the horses. There were screams, there was blood. Absolutely terrifying for two young girls. But we decided to stick it out. We never saw a fascist all day. All the fights were with the police.
When then the police had started trying to charge the barricades, and they weren't very successful, we repulsed them. And finally, as they were going back, the women in the buildings above, these sheds and that, started chucking everything that they could lay their hands on, down on the police. Hot water and scraps from kitchens and other things as well. And the police didn't know what to do, and they ran into the sheds and locked themselves in. And then the police was attacking, and one copper was just about to bounce his truncheon off my nut, and I just stuck out a right hander and he went down. A little bit later, they came up with their hands up, surrendering. Who'd ever seen a policeman surrender? We didn't know what to do. So we took it and told them to show. Police battened away and smashed, and mounted police were battering away for 4 solid hours, and they still couldn't drive the people back. And finally, Mosley, who was the leader of the fascist party in those days, the racist party, was forced to withdraw and had to go back. Many of us was arrested. No fascists were arrested. I was sent to prison for 4 months. Many people of my friends were sent to prison as well. And when I was arrested, all these coppers round here decided to help me to the police station. And when they got there, they just picked me up like a battering ram. They didn't open the police station door with a handle. They just opened it by banging my head against the door. When they got me inside, they just started stamping on my head and banging me over the head with truncheons, and I faded from the scene. And when I woke up a couple of hours later, I heard great cheers from all over, because the news had come through that the racists hadn't broken through, and the chief of police had ordered that Mosley couldn't march, or Mosley was the leader of the racists, couldn't march and had to go back.
Tremendous feeling of pride that we were part of all that. For me, that was the beginning of the feeling of anti-fascism, that they shall not pass, and they did not pass that day. I don't think the Jews were so badly attacked as the Asians had been here, partly because the young Jews were quite well organised, but it never was as bitter then. Jews weren't burnt out in their homes the way Asians have been here. It may have been the isolated incidents of being attacked if they met them in the street, or even in their... Sometimes they'd come to their actual homes, but there was none of this burning out and terrible attacks that the Asians have had. Bombs thrown through the doors, the petrol bombs. We never had anything like that.
Fascism is a movement of force against the working class people, irrespective of where they are. Fascism does away with trade unions. Fascism lives on racial hatred. Fascism doesn't believe in the betterment of the conditions of the working people. It is the strong arm of the capitalist system, in my view.
I started to become actively involved against the National Front in the middle of 1974, where we carried on a campaign up until the end of the 70s. By then the National Front had splintered and broken off. I suppose the most significant part of that was the actual demonstration in Lewisham, where they were literally smashed. They got a terrible pounding, literally a pounding on the streets. Their old philosophy didn't seem to be working, and it wasn't their philosophy, it's the philosophy of one Adolf Hitler controlling and ruling the streets. The National Front became very aggressive, and it started off by the obvious thing, attacking particularly people selling newspapers in the streets, Socialist Workers' Party, but not only Socialist Workers' Party, they attacked people selling the Morning Star, they attacked people selling Militant, and they were becoming very aggressive, and we decided that we'd have to stop it, we'd have to try to stop it. So what we did then, we formed a system where people would have a telephone and we'd be on the end of a telephone, usually on a Saturday morning. And we used to be waiting, and if there was a presence of NF, either in Barking, Stratford, Upton Park, East Ham, we used to go, usually between 10 or 12 of us used to go over there and try to, if you like, remedy the situation. I'd be perfectly honest with you, I was very surprised when we started actually coming to physical contact, and I mean physical contact with these people. I was very, very apprehensive at first. Most of them used to look very, very aggressive. Some of them used to wear military uniforms, which don't mean nothing. Probably none of them was ever in the military. To use an East End terminology, they weren't very good on the pavement. And we started getting a bit more confident. We started feeling that these people were not supermen, you know what I mean? And they're not going to go around bullying people and threatening people and beating up people in the streets. Because in our opinion, they were putting forward poison. They were putting forward ideas about people's colour, racist stuff that was poisonous. And if people like that are allowed to just literally do as they please, then they become acceptable. So we've gone then from a situation of complete defence, you know, in fact being devastated, to stabilisation, right, with the fighting outside the station when they were selling papers, to being in front by having a demonstration. Went right through the middle of their heartland, and it wasn't attacked. So we considered we were in front. It was then that the idea came across about having a big march by the National Front to counteract that balance. They were losing the momentum. They were smashed to pieces, and unfortunately a lot of people in the left side of politics thought it was a disposable item, that the issue had gone away. It might have gone away for them in particular, but it certainly didn't go away for Asian families in Brick Lane or in Cannon Street Road or even around here. You know, it's all very well saying people have got the right to express their own opinions, but when their opinions could lead to some young Asian people, as they did at that time, Atab Ali, a young Asian worker, was coming down the spot of Brick Lane. He was stabbed to death by two skinheads for no apparent reason, just because of the fact he was Asian. And if you allow those people to sell that sort of muck, that is the end result.
There's probably quite a few good old-fashioned liberals out there, trendy lefties, who are feeling quite uneasy with all this talk of violence. And they're saying there's other ways. Well, we're not either or. We're both. We'll try all methods. We'll have marches, we have carnivals, music events, we even have a travelling exhibition showing you all the truths of fascism. History's proven that the fascists base their philosophy on physical force. If you're not prepared to meet that force with physical force, then you must retire from the political arena, because the fascists feed on fear, and to ignore them is to encourage them.
Here, at least 6 people have been arrested and a policeman was injured in scuffles between 2 groups of demonstrators. Members of the British National Party clashed with a group of anti-fascists who were protesting at the March Through Thamesmead in South London.
The march by the extreme right-wing British National Party was through a highly sensitive...
Unfortunately, many of today's anti-racist groups refuse to learn from the past. In an abject display of political cowardice, the organisers of the counter-demonstration to this BNP march, who with the support of local people outnumbered the fascists 10-1, chose to march away from any confrontation. The militant anti-fascists were left to register their protest. Precisely because they weren't smashed at Thamesmead, the BNP consolidated their position there and felt confident enough to expand their activities into neighbouring areas. Just 12 weeks later, having won support from local people, the odds of 10-1 against the Thamesmead had swung to 10-1 in their favour in nearby Bermondsey. Later that day, fascist-controlled gangs rampaged through the streets attacking black people at random.
Basically, I got involved with the Anti-Nazi League in January, after its relaunch, the ANL Mark II. Fortunately, where I live, there was no other alternative. The main reason why I left the ANL to join AFA is, after, as you know, giving out leaflets on the street, trying to sell the papers. I mean, you have a march, they'll have a march, the BNP will march down one street, police will be there cordoning off the ANL, will be shouting, Nazis out, Nazis out. I mean, the Nazis know that they're Nazis, they don't need to be told that. I mean, they're flying the placard and all that. Oh, you know, nice and clicky sort of thing. I mean, AFA, well, me included, would be along that street, halfway across it, with a placard on my hand, smashing it over his bastard head. I mean, what's the point of like saying, oh, there's some fascists here, quick, let's get a nice little banner out, let's get some nice little middle-class school teachers. Let's all band together and all chant nice little 60s in the Summer of Log songs against them. Well, it's true, but unfortunately for me, I mean, you hear about the paper, in left-wing papers that I've read, paper sellers selling next door to right-wing sellers, you know, exchanging pleasantries of the day. I mean, it's sick. I mean, it might as well be a Sunday afternoon car boot sale, as far as I know. I mean, they're talking, oh, nice day, innit? Nice weather. They'll be going home at night, sitting down in the intellectual armchair reading 6 Easy Ways for Socialism. The b****s who they've just been talking to 3 hours earlier will be going smashing windows and posting fireworks through doors, etc., etc. So who are they kidding? They're kidding themselves.
The rest of the life criticise us because we're prepared to do more than just talk about taking on the fascists. We've actually been involved in physically preventing the fascists from holding meetings, from holding rallies. For example, the most recent activity that AFA was involved in was in conjunction with other anti-fascists. We mobilised 200 people in December to stop the BNP Scottish rally, which was attended by John Tyndall, John Peacock and several other dignitaries in the BNP. As a result of that, there was boneheads physically confronted in the streets, were sent packing. There was casuals chased up the city centre, and the BNP leadership were holed up in the Gallery Bar in Argyle Street for hours, for several hours. They were holed up in the Gallery Bar. As a result, the police had to evacuate them along tunnels under the pub and into the train station, and like rats along sewers.
The reason why I've actually come on this programme is that one or two people may have suggested to me that I can be more identifiable by youngsters as opposed to a university intellectual telling them about the bad things about fascism. They are using working class or white youth as foot soldiers, and unfortunately a lot of the youth can't see that they're being used. They've been abused, I would say. They've been deceived by the government and being ignored by the government in the sense that as I've already turned around and said, they've got no housing facilities, they've got no benefit, they've got no jobs. They may have youth training, which I would suggest is a euphemism for making tea and stacking shelves. And then this is put towards them that the cause of all these problems is the immigrants, is the blacks, when it's far from it. So it isn't a racist problem we're dealing with, I think it's an economic problem. It seems there is a shift to the right, and it seems like all the political parties have gone that way, leaving a void which needs to be filled on the left. Now you've got to ask yourself the question, is that going to be filled by another left party, or further to the left than what we've got at the present moment, or is it going to be filled by a right-wing party, something like the fascists, who are going to be there and saying, well, we can lift you out of this problem, we can lift you out of this crisis.
Scotland is the area of highest recruitment for the BNP. They aim to exploit the history of sectarianism between Catholic Republicans and Protestant loyalists. We can start by looking at the Glasgow Rangers battle hymn, the Billy Boys. Football fans think the song is about William of Orange, but in fact it is dedicated to Billy Fullerton, a black shirt commander who founded the gang, the Billy Boys. In 1926 they were hired to smash the general strike, for which they received certificates of merit from the Secretary of State. Fascism has been described as a razor in the hands of the class enemy, and in Glasgow in the 1920s it was literally true. Standing lives are more fashionable these days.
Fascism has a hold in Glasgow now, among a section of Glasgow youth. The Glasgow Rangers Football Club is a focus for that organising. And it's quite clear that within Ibrox now, there is a cadre of fascist organisers who are using Rangers loyalist history as a touchstone in young Rangers. This is where the Northern List and nationalist newspapers hold.
Pierre and Clyde constituency proves the notion that's generally held by the rest of the left that the BNP are just a racist party. The BNP use racism. Racism isn't a principle for the BNP, it's just a tactic that they trot out and use where applicable. In Clydesdale, there isn't much sign of any ethnic minorities. Right? There's very few Asians, very few blacks, very few Chinese people. Right? There's no definite targets. However, what there is a large Irish loyalist population. What they intend to achieve is to build on the bigotry that's already there. Loyalism is a parochial version of fascism anyway. It's based on the idea that there's a Protestant ascendancy, that Catholics are second-class citizens. You know, it's a transferal of Ulster to Scotland, right? And the BNP, they don't want a race war, right? What they want is a sectarian war in Scotland, because the race war politics, they know as well as we do that race war politics won't work up here. They have to use another tactic, right? And the tactic is sectarianism and whipping up the Orangemen, whipping up the loyalists and building on what's there. In other words, what they intend to do is try and broaden the horizons of the localised version of fascism and turn it into the British National Party's version of fascism, for the Papish conspiracy of the loyalists to the Jewish conspiracy of the BNP. The young loyalist Rangers fans who are impressed by the loyalist paramilitaries, right, can then be equally impressed with the BNP, given the links that are being developed, the duality of membership and stuff like that, right, and they can clearly stand as the spokespersons of the UVF in Scotland, right. It's no accident that the Scottish BNP banner at their national rally was alongside the YCV UVF banner, the YCV being the youth wing of the UVF.
I was a member of the Orange Order in Scotland for 15 years. I was a substitute master in an Orange Lodge, district of Glasgow. From being a member of the Orange Order, I became involved in loyalist politics, selling Ulster Defence Association magazines, things like that. I was involved in a flute band as well, went to Belfast every year. And through being involved in that aspect, it was like being anti-Catholic, anti-IRA, you know. But I came up against a problem when I received literature from like the UDA, which was like a magazine called the South African Patriot, which was a racist South African magazine, keep swimming pools white and things like that, which I was quite disturbed about, because although I regarded myself as being a loyalist, I wasn't interested in the racial politics or aspects, National Front, etc. So I was unhappy about that, and I complained about it. They stopped, but just before they stopped, I actually received literature from the Federation of Conservative Students, which was a magazine called The Unionist, which was it had things like Bring Back the B Special, Support the Contras in Nicaragua, Support UNITA, all the sort of right-wing groups around the world. I wasn't interested in the Conservative Party, having just became unemployed and everything else, and then I hated the Tories as much as everybody else.
Due to the activities of the militant anti-fascists, the extreme right has not been able to operate in Manchester for a decade. They've been forced to confine their activities to surrounding towns like Rochdale. AFA has followed them. By leafleting white estates, we seek to cut off their supply of recruits at source, by showing that though many of their supporters are poor themselves, they are the enemies of the poor.
It was when the stickers had actually started to go up, and one of the candidates for the BNP was standing for election. We live in a council area now, and a new family had moved in, a white family, and it was a young girl, I think of 14, she used to go around to the Asian homes at night and throw bricks through the bedroom windows. There was a group of young people who lived nearby who were openly racist. Now they'd come nightfall, they'd come round and smash in windows, throw things through the letterbox. When we'd go out, there'd be verbal abuse. So we decided to call in the police. Now they said they couldn't do anything. I don't agree with violence, but if there's no other way, then you need to.
For many people, the consequences are far more serious. In Newham, an East London borough, a black family remembered another victim, beaten to death a couple of months ago in an unprovoked attack. Even police figures show that in this part of East London, racist attacks have risen by 99% over the last year. While we know the far right does not carry out all the attacks, they benefit from racial hatred, as it is their function to divide the working class against itself. Here in Bermondsey, on the back of their success in opposing the anti-racist march you saw earlier, they have established a successful paper sale. So on this occasion, we took their pitch as part of our attempt to remedy the situation. Our policy is to physically deny them the potential to grow. While we realise they are still relatively small here, in many countries they are not. If we can't stop them now, when they're small, then in all probability we're not going to stop them.
The foot soldiers of the fascists have always been working class. At times of economic chaos, strife, trouble, the fascists rear their ugly heads, pretending to be the new radical opposition, when in fact they are the mercenaries of the rich, hired by the rich to maintain their social order. If only we as a class could realise that it's pointless fighting between black and white, Protestant, Catholic, Jew, Arab, and that our interests lie in standing together. It's no good fighting for the crumbs that fall off the rich man's table. The smaller the crumb, the more violent the fight. It's no good tuppence halfpenny looking down on tuppence. In Germany in 1932, 1 year before Hitler came to power, he received only 20% of the vote. In 1992 in France, Le Pen's National Front received just over 14% of the vote. Remember, fascism doesn't start with concentration camps, that's where it ends.